In a sense, Western civilization as we know it began here. Thousands of years before Christianity, cloaked in mystery high on this mountaintop in Thessalia, a capricious family of gods and goddesses, Zeus and Hera, Apollo, Athena, and Dionysos, made this their celestial home. Out of the fortunate mixture of legend and mythology, history and philosophy, and especially through the epic tales told by a blind storyteller known as Homer, an extraordinary civilization emerged. This land is indeed the cradle of Western civilization. From here the world has received such ennobling gifts as political democracy, the jury system, and the classical arts, poetry and dance, architecture, sculpture, and theater. In its golden age, it was a glorious place. The glory that was once and still is Greece may well have marked the very height of human achievement. For thousands of years, ships have left Athena from its port of Piraeus, headed out to the blue Aegean and the Mediterranean beyond. Sailors then, just as sailors now, respected the uncertainties of the sea. They surely said a prayer to Poseidon, god of the seas, as they passed his temple at Sunio Point. Words fail when one tries to capture the blue of the Aegean Sea. This is the essential blue of Greece that speaks directly to the wandering soul. Ach, Ελλάδα. There are really two Greeces. Mainland Greece, of great geographical and cultural variety, and the Greece of the Aegean. More than 2,000 islands scattered like stones tossed toward the Middle East. For many tourists, the Cyclades Islands, so named because they are clustered in a circle, are the most popular stops. Here are the quaint fishing ports, whitewashed houses, and blue-domed churches of the travel posters. None fulfills expectations more than Mikonos, at once modern and fashionable, yet still true to its character as an ancient fishing village. Windmills, usually named after saints, are everywhere on the islands. But the most famous are here in Mikonos town. One mill is still in working order, and when the white sails are attached to the frame, a crowd gathers to see the blades whirl once again. But it is to the pure white sand beaches that the sun worshippers are most attracted. At sundown, the best place to be is in the port, when the fishermen return with the day's catch. Evening settles in very slowly. Couples stroll along the promenade. The old men sit at tables in front of the taverna, drink their ouzo, and toss their worry beads, while bouzouki music floats in the air. Tourist ships arrive each morning from nearby Mikonos on this deserted and desolate island that was once the most important in the Aegean. It was called the Sacred Island, the supposed birthplace of Apollo, and drew pilgrims from throughout ancient Greece. Fierce marble lions once guarded the entrance to a small lake which, legend has it, was the exact site of Apollo's birth. When pilgrims arrived at the port, they passed through the town along a processional road called the Sacred Way. Only after passing impressive monumental buildings and portals did the religious temples rise before them. The Greeks believed that there should always be a gradual transition from the secular to the sacred. Long before the sun has begun to set, the visitors have left by boat, and ancient Delos is left to the winds and the echoes of its illustrious past. The approach to Naxos, largest of the Cyclades, is marked by this famous marble portal. It was an entrance intended to be a great temple, but was never completed. What remains of the old city sits on a small hill that commands the harbor. Remnants of 13th century ramparts remain, an indication that Naxos and all the islands once had to be defended against a variety of enemies. mainland, there are old Venetian towers and surprisingly verdant hills. Farmers here produce excellent red and white wines, but the specialty of Naxos is a tart lemon liqueur called Kidro. Only a few of the other Cyclades Islands have beaches to compare with those of Naxos. Some tourists spend weeks on the islands. The island ferry system is so quick and efficient, frequent island hopping in the Aegean is a common pastime. The ultimate destination of many travelers is the spectacular island of Thera, also known as Santorini. These islands are in fact the rim of an ancient and once very powerful volcano, whose eruptions altered the seascape of the entire area. In the midst of the crater lies Nea Kameni, an isle of black pumice from which wisps of volcanic smoke still emerge. Sulfur seeping from below colors the water green. Many boats dock here in the harbor at Amudi. The adventurous tourist may make the climb along a winding path from the port to the town above. Lava flows have left ridges along the slope to the sea. The volcanic land is particularly rich and wine grapes are grown, but water is a continual problem on the parched island and has to be brought in by boat. It is an evening ritual to watch the sun fall into the sea on the Greek islands. It has been done for as long as anyone can remember. After sunset, when the stars begin to emerge, constellations appear with mysterious names right out of Greek mythology. Gazing at the stars, we are reminded that sometimes there is little difference between moments and millennia. By far, the largest island in Greece is Crete. So large, in fact, and distant from the mainland, it is really almost a country unto itself. It is the fiery land of Zorba, and a people at once fiercely proud and deeply sentimental. Just like its population, Crete is a land of dramatic and startling contrasts. On this beach, it is said, Zeus himself swam ashore. The limestone caves are believed to have been prehistoric dwellings, which in time became places of worship. "4,000 years ago, when Crete was called Minoa, it was one of the most highly developed civilizations on Earth. The center of that civilization was King Minos' palace at Naxos. It is widely believed that a gigantic eruption of the volcano at Santorini created a huge tidal wave that submerged much of the island and caused devastation from which Minoa never recovered. Many of the Greek islands may have suffered such a fate, leading to the very plausible theory that the southern Aegean is the site of the lost continent of Atlantis. Almost everyone on Crete has reason to believe it. even in these modern times, it is always wise to have the blessings of the sea god Poseidon when out on the unpredictable Aegean. The large island of Rhodes, named after the roses that grow here in profusion, is one of the most fertile of the eastern island group, known as the Dodecanis, the 12 islands. This towering mount has been inhabited and defended since prehistoric times by successive conquerors, a familiar pattern that has left layers of time on all these islands, but none as clearly as here. Remnants of a Greek temple, of a Christian basilica, a crusader's fortress, and the Byzantine church are all found on this spot. Fortunately, all the modern pleasures are also just minutes away. The capital city was a walled fortress built by European crusaders from the Order of the Knights of Rhodes. From here, they made numerous sorties to the Holy Land. And at this port stood the famed Colossus of Rhodes. 100 feet tall, it was a bronze statue of Ilios, the sun god, and was considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The Grand Master ruled the order and the island from this castle. When the Turks occupied Lesbos in the 15th century, they considered it a great prize. They called it the Garden of the Empire for its verdant growth and its fertility. From Mytilene, the capital of Lesbos, the coast of Turkey can be seen less than 10 miles away. In the center of town, the remains of an old mosque are being preserved and reconstructed. Thrace, or Thrace, a sparsely populated province in the northeastern corner of the Greek mainland, is an Eden for nature lovers. When this part of Greece became a Roman colony, the Romans built this aqueduct to carry water to their fortress. Kavala, most importantly, is a seaport in which East meets West. St. Paul brought Christianity here on his way to Rome. This is also the birthplace of the Muslim ruler Muhammad Ali. In Kavala, churches stand alongside mosques. This is an ancient city named after King Philip, father of Alexander the Great, whose ruins are more Roman than Greek. Brutus and Cassius fled here after assassinating Julius Caesar. They were pursued and defeated by Roman armies. St. Paul was once imprisoned here for preaching Christian doctrine. It is not so much that the 6th century Christian basilica has been eroded by time. It actually collapsed under the weight of its own dome when it was constructed. Mount Athos Peninsula, in the region of Chalkidiki, is sacred soil to many Orthodox Greeks. Nearly 1,500 monks inhabit 20 different monasteries. No females can set foot on this peninsula, and supposedly none has for almost 1,000 years. Thessaloniki, named after a sister of Alexander the Great, is the second largest city in Greece and the capital of Macedonia. Here the cuisine is spicier than in the south. Perhaps it is the Turkish influence. Thessaloniki was, like Kavala to the east, a highway for Roman soldiers, as well as another stop for St. Paul on the long road to Rome. Originally constructed as a circular mausoleum for a Roman emperor, this building became in turn a church, a mosque, and then a museum. Somehow those transformations capture the torture history of this land. Mountain streams flow through Edessa, forming a series of waterfalls a tumbled-down rock face covered by huge platonia trees. This icy lake nestles along the northwestern border of Greece. It is not a source of pride to many Greeks that the minarets of Ali Pasha's citadel mark this waterfront. In his time, he was a murderous tyrant who brought misfortune to much of central Greece. The flow of surface water on the great plain of Thessalia has left standing these otherworldly limestone pillars. Not surprisingly, mystics were drawn here in the 11th century to Meteora, which means in the air. At first, they lived in caves and eventually grouped themselves into inaccessible monasteries built high on the rocks. Originally, the only access was by very long ladders that were pulled up behind the climber. Now, some of the monasteries have actual steps cut into the rock. Rarely in the world do we see such a blending of the natural and the spiritual as here in Meteora, the very heart of mainland Greece, where, as with all things spiritual, we feel suspended eternally between heaven and earth. The Peloponnese is surrounded by water, yet it is not an island. It was attached to the mainland until 1882, when a French construction company built a canal 4 miles long through the narrow neck of land that joins the Peloponnese to the mainland. Inland, contrary to general perception, the Peloponnese is as varied as the rest of Greece. Some of the highest peaks hold snow all year round. The gorges run deep and are almost inaccessible. Almost. In Greek, monovasia means only one entrance. Obviously, of course, there is also only one way out. The old walled town seems forever trapped in the past. One of the highest points of the isthmus is the Church of Saint Sophia. None of the Aegean Isles has waters any more crystal clear, or as we say, thalassi, than the bays of the Peloponnese. From this fortress, a troop of Spartan soldiers made a heroic stand against overwhelming Athenian forces during the 27-year-long Peloponnesian War. The very word Spartan is synonymous with courage, since theirs was a culture, unlike their Athenian rivals, that bred warriors from birth. You can come upon an old Acropolis, the word simply means high city, almost anywhere in Greece. But below this one in Mystra are the remnants of a city once called the Florence of the East. The arts flowered here in its heyday in the 15th century. Great artists, scholars, and theologians came to Mistra from all over Europe. Ships from the Aegean often enter the Corinth Canal past the Isle of Poros, which all but touches the mainland. Boats from Poros often cross the 350 yards to Galatas on the Peloponnesian shore. The name Aegina means Pigeon Isle, but its chief attraction is the beautifully preserved temple of Aphia. On this spot stood a proud castle of the house of Atreus, which Homer described as very, very rich in gold. But it has a tragic family history as well, and all the Greek playwrights dramatized the tales of King Agamemnon and Queen Clytemnestra, of Orestes and Electra, all perhaps buried in this circular tomb. The Royal Way leads visitors under the imposing Lion Gate. Greek drama, which began as a religious ritual and evolved into the art form we know today, was performed in theaters throughout the country. The classic comedies and tragedies were, and still are, staged as much to instruct as to entertain. This theater is famous for its extraordinary acoustics. The great Greek-American soprano, Maria Callas, sang here for 14,000 people. It is at this Peloponnesian site that the first Olympic Games were held 3,000 years ago. It was not only for athletic events, there were poetry and musical competitions as well. A vast complex of buildings, training areas, baths, temples, hotels, preceded entry to the stadium itself. One can now take the same processional path and imagine what it felt like to walk beneath the entry arch and see the roaring crowd of 20,000 standing on the stadium terraces, ready to watch the race. There are many routes back to the Greek mainland. Perhaps the most beautiful and diverting is by way of the western Ionian Islands. Zakynthos beaches are protected nesting sites for large sea turtles, but this beach has a different attraction. Throughout Corfu, there are lush forests. Age-old olive trees grow wild on many hillsides. In Kerkyra, or the town of Corfu, the British influence has remained strong. Corfu has even adopted cricket, which is played with passion on this pitch in the city's waterfront park. Back on the mainland, we are drawn inevitably, as were Greek pilgrims thousands of years ago, to Delphi, once the center of the Greek universe. Ancient Delphi was approached along a sacred way, past a rounded marble shrine dedicated to the Earth Goddess. However, the most sacred area was located on a terrace above, the Temple of Apollo. Deep within the temple was the Omphalos, the navel that Greeks believed was the very center of the universe. In a private sanctuary, a priestess, or sibyl, supposedly had the power to foretell the future. Pilgrims came from throughout the world to consult the famed Oracle of Delphi. For many miles, the large island of Evia runs parallel to the east coast of Attica and is only 30 yards away from the highway to Athena at the bridge of Chalkida. Modern cities everywhere are almost indistinguishable, one from the other. But the entire world knows Athena. If the modern world listed its wonders, surely this would be at the very top of the list. Impressive as it remains, we can only imagine how these buildings looked in their prime when they were painted in vivid Greek colors. Ochre and Aegean blue, flaming orange, gold, and forest green. The elaborate entrance to the Acropolis indicates traces of construction from various periods. But much of the work dates from the Roman occupation about 2,000 years ago. The facade of this theater, built by a Greek patron of Roman birth, is surprisingly well preserved. The slightly older theatre, on the same slope of the Acropolis, has not withstood the ravages of time quite so well. In an elegant section of Athena is the former royal palace. Now the Greek Vouli, or parliament, meets here. This restored temple stands on a mound that dominated the Agora, Athena's marketplace, and the center of the old city's public life. Many in Homer's great epic went forth from Athena, as we have on our own small odyssey. In this surprising land, the sea always beckons, as do exotic islands, rocky coastlines, fertile fields, and cloud-covered mountains. We have seen them all, as other eyes, ancient eyes, have also seen them. Only the mode of transportation has changed.